Yeah, I hope that script is right, though. Sony will see that, you know what, these box office numbers right here proves that this franchise is valuable. We can make money on it. No, it probably won't be going for 10 years, since what we see from the box office here is that older audiences see this movie more and appreciate it much more so than does younger audiences,
Yeah, I want to
which
see a
means that this
demographic breakdown.
yeah, which means that this franchise may not have like 10 years left in it, but they can do one or two more. All they need to do is cap the budget at the level of the previous movie, and they'll be fine. But you think that they're going to take away that lesson, or will they see that no, we actually expect to these movies to be more expensive, and we have no interest in going back budget wise, so let's just cap it here? What do you guys think about that?
Ghost Core is not. Ghost Core has a bunch of very smart people in it. I don't think they would ever allow Sony to say, yes, we're going to throw money at it. And I don't think Tom Rothman would be the type that would authorize more money to be thrown after this. I think his say would be, the last one made more profit and it was at this budget. This is the benchmark. And if you go over that, we're not doing it. I think that would probably be the more smarter thing here, because again, as big as Ghostbusters was in the 80s, there's enough data now to say, well, there's something to it, but it's not that big. So if we want to keep making these, and Dan Aykroyd is definitely one of the people that pushes it harder, he knows exactly what he would have to sacrifice in order to get that made. And I think if he really wants it, that's an easy concession to do. Oh, only 75 million? Yeah, we can still make a movie for 75 million. And there's plenty of other examples in the indie sphere that can support that if they use those budget models.
And I will say, I hope that is the outcome here.
Me too.
Because I didn't love the movie, but I liked it enough that I want to see it carry on. I especially like Dan Aykroyd in it. I mean, you can tell his passion. I hope that he wants more.
Here's where I think, because we were tied, I was discussing this with Mark D and Clobbering Times last night on their show, and where I think things are at right now, if this falls off, unless this has like really steady legs, then, you know, all debts are off. They'll continue things as they were planned. Because, not to get into any kind of spoilers, this movie is really set up, though, at the end to like kind of like a Jurassic World thing, to where they're going to keep going. They've got places to go with this. There's things that can be done, but it's not in a way like it's obvious that it ruins this movie, like it's a big setup for it, right? Like, so don't think it's like the MCU kind of a situation. But that being said, so there's plans, and in fact, there is a Netflix animated series coming as well, and I don't know anything as far as details on that, if it's supposed to be this cast, a different group of Ghostbusters, or what it's supposed to be. But anyway, point being, I think that if they have to reevaluate the cost, I think you're right, Andre, where they'll be like, look, the cap on these is 75 million. You cannot spend more than that. That's it. So what that means, they're going to have to start sacrificing some things. Probably Trevor, because he's one of the more expensive ones. They might have to
the weakest of them.
He's one of the weakest, and that's what I'm saying. So they're going to start cutting where they need to worry less. So like McKenna and Paul Rudd are probably the only two that are safe. That's what I would say. Now, the old guard, they're fine because they probably don't cost a fortune. That's the beauty of them. But yeah, like some of the newer characters, I wouldn't be surprised if Finn Wolfhard doesn't return because he's going to be too much money. They may have to finagle something with Paul Rudd because Lord knows what he's asking right now. But the rest of the cast, like I said, it could be give or take, and they're really going to have to make these on a smaller scale. More like Afterlife and less like the last one, unfortunately. Which is sad, because I think you're right, Andre. Despite any of the issues that some people are having with the film, the fans are eating it up. And this is pretty much what the fans have wanted for a while. Like the last movie I've been saying was made for Harold Ramis. This movie was directly made for the fans. Like, that's what it felt like for me at the end of the day, because it has so much shoved into it, and maybe that's part of its problem, you know? But, you know, I think there's still a chance for this, because Culture, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't Sony have like a deal with Netflix where they buy for the streaming rights? So they've already got that money in the bag.
Yeah.
And the video sales on this are probably going to be pretty good, because Afterlife was.
Yeah, I think they're okay on the backside of things. The problem is that I I think that their earnings in the box office are going to be severely compromised. You're gonna have to have a studio exec that's willing to look at the other factors that to greenlight a third film, or even a television show. Because I mean, if you remember correctly, they were talking about that. They were talking about rebooting some kind of an animation. I don't. Does this it will a $300 million performance, get you there?
On a $100 million budget, yeah.
Well, considering the fact that the budget is low and the pre-sales that Sony has been doing over the last few years have been kind of high, they probably don't have to make as much on the normal profit side of things
Probably
unless
right.
they went crazy with marketing. And I didn't see a whole lot of marketing for this film in comparison. So if they pre-sold this for up to like 60 million, then they're only have to really just offset that 40 million with from the budget with the plus the marketing with the box office, and then that determines how much actual profit they get, if any. But I mean, it's a better line for them than normal. Now you compare that to like what Disney does with their $200 to $300 million.
Yeah.
Getting a pre-sale that offsets the budget enough is really a stretch, even with a Disney film.
The break even, though, I think, script, and this is we're looking at 180, so your break even probably closer to 360, global.
4 would be a safer number, but yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you. I'm using the very liberal numbers, not the conservative ones. But yeah, I would say that I don't know how you justify. I mean, maybe Netflix writes him $100 million check.
I wasn't even thinking that much, but if it's that much shit, then yeah, they're making more of these.
Well, I don't know what the contract is with Sony.
To kind of go back to the whole Lord of the Rings thing that was asked earlier, like this is the story that we were told by Robert Shea, and this is probably how these movies are kind of conducted, especially movies like this. And this is probably why it's having a staggered release in other places, is because it's all pre-sold. Because the short version of that was the studio was panicking when Peter Jackson signed on to do $300 million movies. Because remember, at that time, that was not the norm, right? Like that's like somebody saying, we're going to make 3 movies and they're going to be $500 million each right now.
Yeah.
You got to think of it from that perspective. That's what he was doing then. And they're like, you're going to bankrupt the company. You're going to destroy the company. And he's like, they didn't understand. I had everything pre-sold. He's like, the first movie was paid for. He's like, it could have flopped and we still would have made money and sold the second and third one to television or video and still come up with a profit. They didn't understand that I had all that pre-sold in all these other territories and all this other stuff to where they were not risking a dime on that film. So basically the moment it hit theaters, all that was pure profit. And that is why they got rid of him, because he was actually making money. And they wanted, we want that money.
And not only that, that's why Warner Brothers scooped up New Line, because New Line was one of the few smaller studios that actually was doing what the bigger studios was doing. And the reason a lot of smaller studios weren't doing that is because they didn't want to fall into the Golden Globus model, which was they pre-sold so much and they overspent so much that they ended up collapsing. And the people that were arguing with Bob Shaye was thinking that's what he was doing, and he wasn't. He was actually doing it smarter. He was doing it the way the big studios did.
Yeah, so he had all the money up front. He did not, it wasn't any cost for the studio at all, basically. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if Tom Rothman's the same way, especially with Ghost Corps. They probably pre-sell a lot of this to a lot of, and that's the other thing. Look at all the merchandising for this movie. The merchandising is doing the advertising for this movie. You don't even really have to have that much advertising. The buckets are selling out everywhere.
Not only that, man, remember, Sony had the benefit of being connected with the Spider-Man No Way Home stuff. So when they were pre-selling Ghostbusters and Madam Web, they were basically saying, look at the Spider-Man that we just did. It did $2 billion at whatever. We are going to pre-sell this for as much money as we can, and it's going to offset all our costs. Madam Web made nothing. So they were able to kind of write that off. Ghostbusters is going to take in a little bit because they probably packaged it with Madam Web with a couple other films that year, maybe even Bad Boys 4. Don't know. But they're doing this in order to it's basically what Warner Brothers did with their CW shows. They packaged them all together and sold them internationally for a higher value than what they were actually worth, so that they could actually make some money off of them. And that's the model that's being done here. The only way that doesn't work is if your budgets are so high that the pre-sales are really just taking out a really tiny chunk of it, as opposed to offsetting the potential losses from the theater and any distribution sales like video on demand, home video, merchandising, etc. So it's a whole different world of the accountants. And the other part too is in the last 2 years, we've seen a huge cutback in advertising, which means that we're not getting the twice the budget to advertise films anymore because the studios aren't spending it that much. They've actually caught wind and realized we are losing more money on advertising to the film than we are on the traditional methods. And when it comes to advertising, that's setting up websites and domains, which have to operate in perpetuity. And that gets way more expensive than just doing a newspaper print ad and billboards and posters and things of that nature, which worked, 30 years ago. And Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts, Facebook accounts, all those types of things have to be maintained as part of the advertising budget for any type of franchise or any individual film. And that racks up a cost over the long term.
You made me think of something script that Star Trek used to have and they've really screwed up and lost. And Ghostbusters is now, they nurture and they love, and that is they have this huge fan community, especially a news fan community. And these news organizations are running hot right now, getting the information out about this movie, and they're selling this movie for people. And that's because Sony has been, and Ghost Corps specifically, has been very on hands with these groups. Unlike Star Trek, where they cut everything off, right? That's the big difference there. And I think that's where the Ground Roots campaign with this and the fans are really a big, because I've seen so many fans posting the pictures of them in the theaters and their costumes. And there was a guy dressed in a costume at my screening even. Cool. Right. So they're out there. And somebody else told me the same thing. They went and they had a screening was filled with mostly dressed with Ghostbuster people. So yeah. But sadly, going back to something Andre said before, and I think this is maybe the problem with Ghostbusters and where they have to kind of reevaluate it. I don't know if they're getting the younger crowd that they're trying to get with these younger kids. Because I have not seen a lot of kids at this movie. I'm wondering if the demographic isn't there for the younger audience. Because look at Dune and Kung Fu Panda. That's where I see the kids going.
Yeah.
And there was another troubling thing with that as well. I don't have it in front of me, but I read in, I think it was Deadline Hollywood and their box office breakdown. It wasn't the number of people who saw it, but it was how the different age groups reviewed it. And the ones that reviewed Ghostbusters Frozen Kingdom most favorably were the over 25s, whereas the ones that reviewed it least favorably were the under 25s. And by least favorably, I mean, because this is what Deadline Hollywood more or less wrote, they freaking hated it. So the older you are, the more you like this movie. The younger you are, the less you liked it. So if they thought that they were going to win over younger, more modern audiences with the new, younger team, it would appear they failed. Because based on that audience review breakdown, it's the younger audiences that aren't into this movie, whereas the older ones like Tom love it.
And it's funny you say that, because I heard from somebody who I would consider somewhat of an insider, basically that the box office is not better than what they were hoping. So right now it's going to boil down to the fan response to the movie. And if that's the case, and they're taking all the things in consideration, what we're saying, that's why I was saying earlier, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of the younger cast fall off in the next movie. And that's one of the main reasons why, besides price, is because clearly they're going to look at it, well, we're not gaining this new young audience, so we're going to have to cater to the older ones. And that's probably where they'll stick with that. Could very well be. But we'll have to wait and see. Because the problem with Ghostbusters, unlike Dune, is they don't have a Timothy Chalamet or a Zendaya to put in it.
I was about to say,
what's big, but he's not as big as like one of those guys. Yeah, sorry.
What's the over under in them recruiting Zendaya and Timothy Chalamet for part 3?
Well, that's what they'll need. Is here's what you do. Here's your ace in the hole. You introduce Oscar in the next movie, and you have Chris Pratt or somebody like that play Oscar. That's your only ace in the hole you have right now.
That's
for those
true.
Who are like, oh, who the fuck is Oscar? Oscar's the baby from part 2. But anyway, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Andre.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, that's where you put Chalamet.
Finn has done nothing.
He's
for
a little
the movie.
too young for that, but yeah, no, Finn. I agree with you. Like, he's not a Timothy Chalamet draw. Exactly, Paul.
No, I think that was their hope, but he's done Sweet Zip Ball. The girl who plays Phoebe truly has, I think, the royal jelly. She
is much better. Yeah, she's a draw.
She was really sweet in it.
Yes,
My
she was.
review for I'm going to be doing, like, my reviews are never normal, but the one thing that I liked about the movie, not diving into the minutiae of it, was that it felt like a movie. Like, back in the day, you just went to movies to go to a movie, and if you weren't pissed off after the hour and a half, you were happy. And I'm putting too fine a point on it, but maybe due to social media, due to the fact that our pop culture properties, which would include Ghostbusters, actually, along with Star Trek, Star Wars, all that shit, and the fact that we're fixated on it on YouTube and in social media now, and having it seen crash and burn, we're now ultra picky. Maybe because we're gun shy. And what I liked about the movie is that it was just a movie, and it had enough things in it that didn't piss me off, that I went, okay, that was a good time.
This clip was taken from Midnight's Edge in the Morning, which streams live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Midnight's Edge main channel. There, you can send in your live questions and comments before clips and full stream replays are uploaded to Midnight's Edge live archives. We are also on Twitter, Rumble, Odyssey, and Facebook, so smash that like, help share, subscribe, and join us.